Morning, everybody. We're going to be getting started in 1 minute.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Will. How are you?
Good morning.
Sorry, I was clicking on the wrong link.
Oh, no worries. No worries. We're just getting started in just a second.
Okay, cool.
So good morning, everybody. My name is Tim Receiver, and I work for Peace Tech Lab, which is a nonprofit based in Washington, D.C. on the campus of the U.S. Institute of Peace. I'm in D.C., but I've lived in Louisiana along the Gulf Coast for several years, and New Orleans is by far my favorite city in the entire world, and there is no second place. For those who weren't with us a couple months back, the mission of the Peace Tech Lab is to explore ways to use media, data, and technology to prevent violent conflict all over the world. And today you're taking part in one of Peace Tech Lab's newest programs called the Road to Equal Justice. So this program is taking place in 16 cities across the US, and we're looking at ways that technology tools and strategies can help social justice organizations. We've already made virtual stops in Baltimore, Denver, Boston, and we wrapped up Miami last week, and we're now back in New Orleans. We were here back in April, and we're going to try to go back in person starting in October. So hopefully we'll see you in person soon. When we were sending out surveys, many of you told us that media and social media strategies is an area that you would like to get more training on, and that's what we're really going to focus on today. We've got Ashley Reid from Hootsuite here, who will be here to talk about social media strategies for activists. Brian Fairbanks, who is a journalist and social media expert from Converse Digital in New Orleans. He was formerly at NBC Universal and Turner Broadcasting. He'll be here to discuss fostering a sense of community through social media platforms. This series of workshops in New Orleans will be honoring Louisiana civil rights leader, Reverend John H. Scott, and the John H. Scott Memorial Fund, celebrating its 40th year, providing scholarships in his name. And if you want to learn more about that, it's at jhsfund.org. So in our programs over the year, I've heard many people say that technology is the problem, or at least a major problem to the issues they're facing. And there is definitely truth to that statement. We've seen the downside of technology over the past few years. Platforms like Facebook and Twitter have been allowing the spread of misinformation, racism, outright lies for years. We've seen the deadly consequences from the needless deaths from COVID-19, the misinformation around that, and we've seen the effects of misinformation on the Capitol attack on January 6th. And these platforms magnify problems that have been with us for centuries. What has changed is the speed at which these messages now spread. We can't fix all the bad things that technology does for sure, but there are many positive ways to use it to help scale and accelerate your organization. When we look at the statistics around it, we see most nonprofits have an average of just one person or less to run their technology. And we're all up against big problems and really small budgets. And so we're hoping to level the playing field with this workshop series on technology for social justice. We've already talked about data and data analytics and visualization a couple months back. Today, obviously, is around social media. And we really believe in the power of local networks to solve local challenges. For New Orleans, that means bringing in experts from the Vera Institute of Justice, Operation Restoration, and expert trainees from here in New Orleans. We also believe in the power of low-cost, easy to implement, off-the-shelf technologies. You've told us that tools are too expensive or too hard to learn. So we want to show you some free and cheap tools and strategies that you can apply that don't take up a lot of your time and don't take up a lot of your money. Before moving on, I'd like to thank our partners at Hogan Lovells who made this possible, helping us put these workshop series together. And as you can see, we're all using Zoom webinar today. So please raise your hand if you have any questions. Put your questions in the Q&A pod as well, or the chat pod, and they'll be answered as soon as we see them. Okay, so first up, I'm honored to welcome Will Snowden, the director of the Vera Institute of Justice in New Orleans. Vera's mission is to end the overcriminalization and mass incarceration of people of color, immigrants, and people experiencing poverty. Will works on Vera's partnerships with criminal justice actors and community leaders while identifying new collaboration with government entities and community organizations. Prior to joining Vera, Will was a public defender for 5 years, representing New Orleans in all stages of cases, from arraignment to trial. Will focused on advocacy around reforming the procedures, systems, and policies around jury duty in an effort to promote diversity and representation in the jury box. Will is here today to talk about Vera's programs and how they use media, data, and technology as well. So good morning, Will. Thank you very much for joining us today, and welcome to the Road to Equal Justice. The floor is yours, sir.
Thanks, Tim. I really like the phrase that you said called big problems and small budgets. I think we can certainly apply that to some of the issues we're working on here in New Orleans. Really excited to be with you all today. I'm going to give a little insight into some of the issues that Vera has been working on in New Orleans, and then share with you some little pieces of our reports and some of our data visualizations that my colleagues have been able to produce. And happy to have questions at the end for a dialogue about some of Vera's work. So I'll share my screen and then we'll go from there. All right. Tim, I can see you. Can you give me a thumbs up if the slideshow is presenting? Great, thanks. So the Vera Institute of Justice is a national nonprofit. We were founded in 1961 in New York with a specific focus on money bail. Since 1961, we have evolved to address many of the other issues in the criminal legal system, and largely doing so through a lens of research and data analysis, in which we use the research and the data to try to identify problems, which then help us identify solutions and come up with solutions to really create a more equitable and fair criminal legal system that more accurately upholds an idea of justice and fairness, as well as providing community safety for all those that are involved. When we think about data, one of the things I want to leave you all with to remember is that we can't manage what we don't measure. Let me say that again. We can't manage what we don't measure. And one of the roles that I embody in the New Orleans office is figuring out how do I get my research team access to data as it relates to the criminal legal system. Because we need to understand through data the nature of the problem. I think sometimes we have around the country, let me back up, around the country we're seeing an increase in incidents of violence, whether it's shootings, homicides, we're seeing that across the country. What we're also seeing is a rollback to kind of problematic narratives that we've heard before as it relates to law and order and locking people up and kind of throwing away the key, knowing that incarceration actually doesn't promote community safety, because if it did, Louisiana would be the safest state in the country because we have the highest incarceration rate in the country and in the world. And what we can do with data is we can actually contextualize and provide more understanding and insight into what the problem actually might be, to then figure out what is the framework in which we should be talking about solutions. It's also important to know in the jurisdictions across the country, and even here in New Orleans, when we hear the chief of the police or the respective mayors or sheriffs or DAs, whomever might be in your jurisdictions, talking about terrible incidents of violence, those are certainly things that we need to be concerned about. But at the same time, we know that outlier cases don't create policy. And one of the things that we have to be wary of is when there's a terrible case, a terrible incident, a terrible murder that happens in one of our cities, and that then becomes a driving force for creating some policy, and when we don't actually understand the context of that one case kind of being an outlier of all the other cases. And so I wanted to share that idea that we can't manage what we don't measure. Vera often positions itself in New Orleans and in Louisiana of being able to have access to data to help illuminate issues, but also illuminate things that are working well. We first came to New Orleans in 2006. The then council member James Carter invited Vera down specifically to look at the New Orleans jail population. So at the time, the jail population was averaging a monthly average of about 6,500 people before Hurricane Katrina. As many of us know, Hurricane Katrina really kind of revealed the problems of the New Orleans criminal legal system and really just the bloated size of our jail population. So before the storm, we were averaging 6,500 people. Today, we have, I don't know exactly what the monthly average is, but we have around 775 people in our jail. We have very, very low numbers compared to where we were more than 15 years ago. And so that reduction from averaging 6,500 people a month to having under 800 people in our jail now, or revolving around the number of 800, is a testament that this size of the city doesn't need that size of a jail. And Vera has been involved since 2006, using data to understand who is in our jail population and why are they there, and what are the policies we could deploy to reduce the jail population without compromising community safety. One of the most influential policies that we were involved with was changing the policy of allowing people who are serving DOC time to serve the time in a local jail. So when we discontinued that practice, we effectively removed almost 3,000 people from the New Orleans jail. And then from there, we were able to look at the remaining 3,500, identify the types of charges that they were being held on, the pretrial detention kind of bail practices they were being held on, whether they were extradition warrants, whether they're probation holds, whether it's a fines and fees warrant, and get clarity in understanding who is in the jail, and then trying to manage the conversations of, do we actually need or want these types of people in our jail? Frequently, we can ask elected officials, who do you want in your jail? And they'll say murderers, rapists, armed robbers, the kind of classic violent, scary language that sometimes we hear. We then can use that framework and say, okay, if you think, and we're not necessarily creating our own framework, if you think this is the framework of the people you want in your jail, Vera can provide the data and information of who's actually in your jail, and then say, okay, well, you have people who are charged with unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. You have people that are charged with, small amount felony theft. You have people that are charged with possession of heroin. These people don't actually meet the framework that you just created in terms of who you want in your jail. So now let's have conversations about the policies we can deploy to get these people out. And so what we've been able to do in partnership with interested government, elected officials, community organizations, other nonprofits that do advocacy with the criminal legal system is shrink the size of the New Orleans jail. Although we should very much be happy and proud of that decarceration effort, right? Reducing the jail population by more than 85%, we have not moved the needle in terms of the overrepresentation of Black men in our jail. So if you were to peel back the roof of the jail in 2006, you would see, more than 85% of the people in the jail were Black men. If you were to peel back the roof today, you would see, and I have the exact number a little later in a slide, about 86%, or maybe it's 83% of the people in the jail are Black men. So we haven't moved the needle on reducing the racial and ethnic disparities. And as my colleagues Teresa and Connor are doing monthly jail population reports about the New Orleans jail, we're able to do something called a relative rate index to understand the incarceration rate of Black men as compared to white men, or Black women as compared to white women. We can do that relative rate index to get an understanding of the overrepresentation, and then have a conversation about what the policies we need to be considering to reduce that overrepresentation so that we actually have some semblance of parity. One of the things that Vera does is we do research and we write reports. Now, reports are very much a tactic in furtherance of a larger goal. And when we do our research and we do our analysis, we want to compile that information so that we can share it. But we also recognize that there are some people who love to read and access reports, and there are some people who might want to read a 2-pager or whatever it might be. But again, using the power of data and research to name the problem, understand the problem, to then inspire and try to create solutions is one of the things that we try to do with our work. And in 2017, we issued a report called Past Due, examining the costs and consequences of charging for justice in New Orleans. And one of the things that we were able to understand from the data analysis was the average length of stay that people were experiencing in jail, and the number of people who were in jail simply because they didn't have access to money. Now, bail is a whole conversation, and I will tell you that money bail actually doesn't keep people safe. Money bail is a system that allows people to get out of the jail if they have access to money and stay in the jail if you don't. It doesn't actually talk about potential threat to community safety. And as long as we continue to use money as the keys to the jail, we won't really have an efficient system to promote community safety, because access to wealth will be the determining factor of who stays in jail and who doesn't. But what we were able to highlight in this particular report as you can see, we can look at the number of people that were jailed for the duration of their case, meaning they were never able to bond out, and then the average length of the time that they were actually in jail. And then we also were able to look at the same comparison for felony cases as well as misdemeanor cases. Another part of the analysis in that report, we were looking at something that we call money and justice, which was the part of a title in the next report I'll bring up. But when we think about money and justice, we're talking about the extraction of money from vulnerable New Orleanians. And in New Orleans, we have a system that was partially funded by the people that were coming through it. So you can see as part of our race equity analysis and understanding how certain residents in New Orleans, specifically Black residents in New Orleans, were experiencing the extraction of money more than others. This report was able to highlight that Black residents paid $5.4 million in bond premiums and bond fees. They were also charged $2.7 million of conviction fines and conviction fees. And so when we think about that in terms of a percentage or a rate, we can highlight that when facing fines and fees, Black residents were jailed at 1.5 times the rate of white residents. Now, the practice of incarcerating people for not paying fines and fees has been discontinued, partially due to great advocacy from public defenders and litigators, but also being informed by the data that Vera was able to provide. Another part of our work, we do research, we do analysis, but then we think about like, how do we share it? How do we use it to inform government officials, folks in the community, but also how do we add to people's knowledge and understanding of a particular issue? So this is a picture of me testifying at the state capitol, actually opposing a bill that was trying to forgive an over-collection of money by bail bondsmen from New Orleanians as it relates to a bail fee. So just kind of big picture, our data analysis had revealed that bail bondsmen were charging an extra 1% as part of the bail fee, as opposed to, I think it was supposed to be 3%, but they were charging 4%. And our analysis had revealed that they were overcharging by about $1 million. And we partnered with the Southern Poverty Law Center, who you see two gentlemen to the left of me, if you're looking at the picture, they're from the Southern Poverty Law Center. They were involved in informing the insurance commissioner, Jim Donnellan, that this overcharging had taken place. And then Jim Donnellan, the insurance commissioner, had said, okay, you have to, bail bondsman, you have to return the $1 million. Then a bill gets introduced that says the bail bondsmen don't have to return the money, and that it was a mistake in language or intent. I forgot what their explanation was, but they basically forgave that over collection of money. I mean, although we weren't successful in opposing the bill at this particular hearing, part of our work is to ensure that we're providing the data to understand the issue. And one of the ways in which we share that data is at the state capitol, as well as local city council meetings. I mentioned another report, Paid in Full, a plan to end money injustice in New Orleans. This particular report was our proposal of how New Orleans could get away from a money bail system and replace it with a system that more accurately tries to assess a person's potential threat to community, and not using money to be that deciding factor of who stays in jail and who doesn't. One of the things that we were able to reveal as part of our data analysis was the financial conflict of interest that existed when a judge was setting a bail on a particular person. That bail fee that was getting collected, 1.8% was going to the court. And part of our research and data analysis in partnership with some of the litigators, were able to demonstrate that that was unconstitutional and a financial conflict of interest. And in 2018, is it 2018? 2019. Time is crazy to remember, as I'm sure some of you might struggle with as well. I think it was 2018. There were 2018, two federal court decisions that said the way that New Orleans and really Louisiana has structured the ways in which the court receives a percentage of the fee is a financial conflict of interest. And then also recognizing that it was a due process violation not to take into consideration a person's ability to pay. And you'll see on the graphic on the right, the conflict of interest that exists in setting money bail and imposing fees. Our data analysis was able to demonstrate that 75% of the court's budget comes from city and state resources, but 25% actually come from bail bond and conviction fees that are paid by the people that are coming through the court. And so the federal judges, there were two different cases. One case was looking at bail fees. The second case was looking at conviction fees. Their rulings were fairly similar. They basically were saying you can't be the determining person to decide the size of the pie, knowing that you're going to get a slice of that pie. Like, it's a financial conflict of interest. And that decision we were using as an opportunity to really just get rid of money bail in New Orleans and replace it with a different system. Unfortunately, the judges didn't take the opportunity to kind of get rid of money bail. They were able to go to the state legislature and get a bill that essentially cured the financial conflict of interest by no longer having the fees collected by the court go to the court. The fees were then going to be transferred to the city of New Orleans. So you have a question on money bail. Are there models in other cities that we could use in New Orleans? So I think there certainly are other models. A lot of people will hold up Washington, D.C. as a model. New Jersey, I think in 2017 maybe, or yeah, I think 2017, they got rid of a money bail system. I think Tucson, Arizona is a model that we hold up. Cook County is a model that we hold up. When we talk about DC, a lot of people talk about DC as being a great model. And I don't have the percentages with me, but they have a very, very impressive rate of people that are released without using money, and they have a high rate of returning for their court appearances, and they have a low rate of being rearrested. I know New Jersey has gotten a lot of attention. I'm not as familiar with New Jersey's system of how they've eliminated money bail, but what we have seen is a reduction in pretrial detention in terms of the jail population, as well as a reduction in, I think it was the overall length of stay that people were staying in jail. And there hasn't been, at least from my understanding, there hasn't been an increase in crime rates. Now, I say that with an asterisk because I don't want people to make the mistake of thinking that crime rates are controlled by jail population, or that if we release more people from jail, then we should expect crime rates to go up or down. I do know when bail reform gets attacked, they will say, these reforms let all these people out of jail. Now our crime has gone up, right? They're mistaking correlation and causation, which is a frequent problem that we see when types of reforms are being opposed. Additional portion of this report, again, highlights the role that money was playing in our criminal legal system. Our proposal was to discontinue the practice of funding the court, the DA, the public defender, discontinue the practice of that money coming from the people that are going through the system, and just paying the system in full. That's why the report is called Paid in Full. And we were involved with the city council members committing to paying for the criminal legal system in full, so that we don't have to rely on the backs of people that are coming to the system. Ultimately, we were unsuccessful, which is part of this work. We were not able to get the courts to change their practices in terms of using bail. We weren't able to have the city council influence the court in their bail practices. But part of this work, you don't win all the time. Part of this work is very much incremental. And I will say that from my perspective, Vera's analysis and research is frequently cited and used by others to understand the issue of money bail and conviction fines and fees. So again, the theme that I mentioned earlier, you can't manage what you don't measure. One of Vera's roles in New Orleans and in Louisiana is providing the measurement so that people can then figure out how we want to manage a particular issue. I know one of the things y'all have been talking about in this series is like media, like how do you use media to inform constituents? How do you inform community? How do you inform government actors? We did a photo essay of 12, New Orleanians who've been impacted by what we call money injustice. And one of the things that Vera has access to is a ton of data. But if we say, and I'm making these numbers up, if we say, 500 people came through the New Orleans criminal legal system in 2020, and 200 of them stayed in jail because they couldn't make their bail, that tells us numbers, but it doesn't tell us the human side of that impact. And so one of the things that we try to do is make sure we're pulling out personal human stories to understand what this issue, what this problem looks like for a person that's experiencing it. And so if you go to the Vera website and you just type in paid in full, you'll be able to see this photo essay. And it's some really awesome pictures of 12 New Orleanians. And it's them telling their story in their own words of how they were impacted by either the money bail system or the conviction fines and fees. And you'll hear stories of people talking about, their family member having to decide to either to pay rent or to try to pay bail, or figuring out ways in which people were trying to keep their job if they weren't able to make bail. And just the additional problems that come with unnecessary pretrial detention is highlighted in the photo essay. And that's one of the ways we were trying to use media to highlight the issue. I also want to talk to you a little bit about our work as it relates to opposing the expansion of the New Orleans jail. So we recently built a new jail in 2015, and that was largely influenced by a federal consent decree that's been in place since I want to say 2007. The New Orleans jail has historically had problems, and not just with over incarceration. Remember, I was telling you about that number of 6,500 people, but also problems in terms of overdoses in the jail, deaths in the jail, suicides in the jail, just the conditions of confinement. I used to be a public defender, and I remember going to the Orleans Parish Prison to visit the people that I had the privilege of representing, and the walls just visibly having mold on them, and that's like where we're meeting. And just think that's the attorney-client visitation room. I never went into an actual cell, but to imagine like what other problems might be in terms of black mold or whatever it might be that the people who are incarcerated are being exposed to. But we had this federal consent decree, built a new jail, opened it up in 2015. And Vera was involved in the overall size of the jail. So in 2010, the sheriff, I believe, proposed a new jail complex that would house 5,600 people. And when he said the number of 5,600, I think a lot of elected officials gave him praise for reducing the size of the jail, because we were so accustomed to 6,500 being our average that the idea of reducing it by almost 1,000 seemed to be progressive. Vera and Orleans Parish Prison Reform Coalition and other organizations were involved in opposing the idea of that we needed a 5,600 bed jail. Part of Vera's work in New Orleans, in 2007, we issued a report trying to highlight for the elected officials and James Carter and other city council members of like how they can reduce their jail population. Remember, that's one of the main reasons we were brought here. Issued this report in 2007, forecasting all these different reforms that the city should adopt. And then when the city council was in a position to approve a 5,600 bed jail complex, Vera and others said, hold on, you all just committed to these reforms. And our research and data and projections say if you stay true to these reforms, by the year 2020, 10 years from now, you're only going to need a jail that needs to house 1,500 people. And so with that understanding, City Council only approved part of the sheriff's proposal for the one jail complex of our current jail, which has a capacity of 1,438 beds. And as I mentioned earlier, our current population is around 775. So really thinking about, do we need to have a bigger jail? And now that we have a new jail that was opened in 2015 with a capacity of 1,438 beds, it's almost half empty right now. Why are we considering building another jail? And from the sheriff's perspective, he will frequently represent that he's in charge of the conditions of confinement for when people are brought to his care. And I agree with that. The proposal for what's called phase 3, which would be this additional jail building, is specifically for people with serious mental illness. A jail for people with serious mental illness. It doesn't make sense, right? Mental illness is a health problem, not a crime problem. So from Vera's perspective, we're opposing the expansion because we do not believe in policies that continue the criminalization of mental illness. What we have suggested is using the available space in the current jail, it's almost half empty, renovate that space to adequately house the people that have to be housed in the jail and have mental illnesses, but use the savings that you wouldn't waste on building another facility. Use the savings to stand up a continuum of care that exists in the community, either a forensic hospital, a crisis receiving center, whatever it might be, so that people can get access to care without having to be arrested. And so that's one of the fights that we're working on right now. The kind of the proposal. I don't know if people on the call are in New Orleans or are familiar with New Orleans, but if you go on Perdido Street, which is, I kind of find it not ironic, not funny either, but Perdido means lost in Spanish. But if you go on Perdido Street, on this little box or figure on the right is the new jail that was opened in 2015. On the left is the kitchen and the warehouse, which that has been built. What hasn't been built yet is right here in the middle. And this is an old clip from a paper, but the proposal, I think at the time of this paper, was for 600 beds to be in that facility. Right now, because we have such a lower jail population and just a different response to people with mental illness, the proposal is to have 89 beds. You can see on this little figure on the left, the proposal to retrofit the jail would cost $10 million. It would take about a year, a little under a year, and there wouldn't be a huge increase in operational costs. For the new jail building, I think this figure is actually closer to $50 million. It would take almost 3 years to construct. It would have an annual operating cost of $8 million a year. My colleague Connor has been doing some really awesome work as it relates to data visualizations in partnership with our other colleague Teresa, as it looks at the New Orleans jail population. And every month we get these awesome reports that highlight the different trends that we're seeing in the jail populations, not only for Orleans Parish, but for, I believe, 9 other parishes. And you can see in October of 2020, we were at about 907. And what you can't see on this particular chart, but in July of 2020, I think we got down to about 775. And so if you would imagine, a couple more months back, the line would go down a little bit to 775. So we actually saw an increase between July and December, with the apex being at 1,016 people. But then since December 19th or so, maybe December 10th, we see a constant decline. And as of June 15th, just last month, we were down to 771. So I share this to say, as we use data to get understanding about an issue, if we can still see there's a trend of our jail population going down, we want to use that information to frame the conversation from a population perspective, from a needs perspective. Do we actually need another jail with such a large jail population? I mentioned briefly some of the reports that my colleagues Teresa and Connor have been working on as it relates to the visualizations of pretrial detention rates and relative rate indices. This is one of those images. It highlights the 10 different parishes that we've been collecting information on. And what we're able to do is compare these parishes. And eventually, I think we're actually going to get to compare not quite all 64 parishes. And I'd say in Louisiana, we say parish. It's used just like you would use the term county. There are 64 parishes in Louisiana. My understanding is we have the necessary access to the data in 61 of the parishes. So what we are going to try to do is create profiles, and I'll show you an example of the Orleans Parish one for all 61 parishes that we have access to get an understanding of the pretrial detention problem in Louisiana. Part of this work is helpful for me when I go to the state capitol, because when I do go to the state capitol, I talk about Louisiana's incarceration rate and how it is, the highest incarceration rate in the world. And there's always this one representative who says, well, there's no way that we lock up more people than North Korea. So I have to explain, we're talking about a rate of incarceration. Like when you cook grits, you got a cup of grits, 3 cups of water, 2 cups of water, whatever it might be. Like we're talking about a rate. And for whatever reason, this particular representative doesn't understand that. And so now what we're able to do is I can reach out to the state representatives in Caddo Parish, talk to them about their pretrial detention rate as it compares to those in Calcasieu or as it compares to those in Lafayette, so that people can actually have an inward-facing mirror on the state of Louisiana. So when we're talking about how we're reaching this prison capital status, we actually can have some more specifics. And so it's really exciting analysis that Connor and Teresa are doing, and it will help us move the conversation and policies as we talk about decarceration in Louisiana. I mentioned to you the relative rate index and the over-incarceration of Black people, specifically Black men in New Orleans. And as you can see, in June, there were 82% of the people in the jail were Black men, when Black men only make up 26% of the New Orleans population. And so this should be a statistic that offends everybody on this call, right? And I think there is frequently a narrative that is untrue that talks about Black people having, being more criminal or having more criminality. What this data says to me is that there's been a disinvestment in the Black community that has resulted in this overrepresentation at the jail. And so we think about the criminal legal system is positioned to be the catch basin for the failures of all the other systems. So if you actually want to reform the criminal legal system, you can do that in the classroom by having adequate education. If you want to reduce the disparities, we need to talk about adequate housing, transportation, access to jobs. And so I'm excited that we can use this data to then have conversations kind of further upstream, also called social determinants of health, to talk about ways in which we can improve the criminal legal system. I mentioned the relative rate index. We also looked at the jail detention rate, and I thought I had a clip about the relative rate index, but maybe I don't. This is the jail detention rate among the 10 parishes that were selected on that original map of Louisiana that I was showing. But you can see in Bossier Parish, how high Bossier Parish is as compared to Orleans. And so even just having this comparison amongst parishes hopefully can inspire conversations of understanding, okay, what's happening in Orleans? They have a jail detention rate of 242 as compared to Bossier, right? And then what this also does, it kind of creates a heat map for us as Vera is considering expanding its work beyond New Orleans. What are the parishes that we should be focusing on? So it looks like I might have a couple of questions, so I'll address the two. So the first general organizational question, for Vera as a whole, are you driven primarily by local offices and issues, or is there strong national guidance from New York on strategies and tactics? So I have so I'm the director of the New Orleans office. I have the privilege of determining what our issues are that we're going to work on, because the issues in New Orleans and Louisiana may not be the issues that Vera National is seeing in New York and California and Wyoming and Wisconsin, whatever it might be. We think about different altitudes in which the kind of place-based offices are able to operate. Vera has 4 kind of place-based offices. Although the national office is situated in New York, there's a team that's called Greater Justice New York, and they focus on issues in the state of New York. We have an office in Washington, D.C. that focuses primarily on governmental affairs. They also house a lot of the members of the Reshaping Prosecution team. We have the New Orleans office, and then we have an office in Los Angeles. So although the national office sets the mission of the organization, we create our own visions for the work, specifically the vision for the New Orleans office. If we think about organizations that have a vision statement or a mission statement, Our vision is a Louisiana where we all are free, free to be healthy, free to be safe, and free to thrive. And we take that vision and we think about what are the things that are getting in the way of people's freedom. And obviously we can talk about incarceration, you can talk about the evolution of mass enslavement to mass incarceration. But we have the privilege of setting our own agenda for the New Orleans office. And then next question, is there a central repository for all your criminal justice data for New Orleans? I don't think there is. I think that's part of the problem, is we have a data infrastructure issue in New Orleans. I've seen it. I don't work in the data or know it as intimately as my colleagues Teresa and Connor do, but I have been involved in submitting data requests for my colleagues to be able to do their research. And there was one data request that we submitted to the clerk of court, and they just said they couldn't process it. You know, I've heard people talk about having a paperless office, right? Everything is kind of scanned and whatnot. The clerk of court office frequently is a paper office. Like everything is just in paper format. And I experienced that from when I was a public defender. Oh, and I see my colleague Connor is on and shared data.nola.gov is one of the repositories that I was not familiar with. Thanks, Connor. But I would, as I hear Carla's question, I think about the data that we are working to get from the district attorney's office, or data that we want to get from the clerk of court or from the judges. And there's still some work that needs to be ironed out and having access to that data and creating that transparency. I will also say that the district attorney data doesn't necessarily sync with the clerk of court data, doesn't sync with the sheriff data, doesn't sync with the police department data. And so since they use different systems, different kind of key terms and programming, it's hard to get all that data together to do a streamlined analysis. And sometimes that creates problems in terms of the research that we want to do.
All right, any other questions for Will? All right, Will, I really appreciate your time. I love the quote that you had. We can't measure what we can't manage what we don't measure. And I think New Orleans is really lucky to have Vera and have you there doing the work you're doing on criminal justice reform. So any final remarks, Will, before we turn it over to Ashley?
No, yeah, I really am. I think I really consider my role as a privilege to be working with such a great team, but also to be working in such a great space. In New Orleans, criminal justice reform is very much a collaborative process. And it's exciting for Vera to be part of that collaborative process and to be using our research and data resources and muscle to be in service and furtherance of some of the other awesome nonprofits that are doing great advocacy work to help, do what they do in terms of making a difference here in New Orleans.
All right. Well, thanks again, Will, for your time today and for joining us. Really appreciate it, and have a great weekend.
Thanks. You too. Bye, everybody.
So next up, we have a session with Ashley Reid, who is a senior business value analyst at the social media management company Hootsuite. Ashley's profile, I was reading it this morning. It says, I use data to help you get smarter and stronger about best strategies to connect with your audiences, which says a lot. Until recently, social media activism has been somewhat optional for brands. It seems like a lifetime ago with COVID, but just 3 years ago, Nike made headlines for taking a stand with Colin Kaepernick. The murder of George Floyd, however, has been a catalyst for many people and companies to examine their neutrality in the face of police brutality and systemic racism, and consequently turn to social media to express their support. And Ashley has been leading the effort to show people how social media can be used for activists, and we're extremely lucky to have her with us today. So welcome, Ashley. It's great to have you back with us. Please take it away.
Thank you, Tim. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Good morning, New Orleans. I'm Ashley. I am your speaker for today. By day, like Tim said, I work as a social media consultant at Hootsuite, which is a social media management company. A little bit about myself. I have, lived, studied, worked across 3 continents. So I really consider myself like a global citizen. And I think that status has really helped me become a more empathetic marketer. And so, yes, I try to help my clients get smarter about the strategies that they employ on social and help them connect, their audience with their audiences and achieve their organizational objectives. And, by night, I consider myself a reality television fanatic. Real Housewives drama, Love Island, Too Hot to Handle, give me all of it, I will watch it. Um, and I'm very excited to be joining with you guys today. Hopefully, by the end of this session, we will walk away with like some very lofty goals and some very realistic first steps for how we can approach social as a social justice organization. We're going to talk a little bit about, social media activism. What is it? The benefits, some successful movements, slacktivism, so some critiques of social media activism, and if they're valid or not. We'll talk about where to start and what to post. And then finally, we'll examine 5 best practices from other social media justice organizations. And then we'll have like a little quick wrap up and Q&A session. I hope that sounds good to everybody. So let's dive in. Let's start with what is social media activism? Well, social media activism is a form of protest or advocacy for a cause that uses social media channels, right? And because hashtags play a very central role in mobilizing these movements, oftentimes you hear it used interchangeably with the term hashtag activism. So you will probably have heard either or, right? Now, my wish for is for this presentation to be a little bit interactive. That it's virtual is a little bit difficult, but what we're going to be doing is I have Slido slides built into this presentation. I just want you to take your camera, and hover over that QR code, or you could go to slido.com and enter the 6-digit number on your screen. And the question that I want you to answer for me is, uh, which was the first, social media activism movement to get the ball rolling? Was it the California immigration protests, Colombian Las FARC protests? Was it Black Lives Matter? Was it Occupy Wall Street or Arab Spring protests? Like, when you think of social media activism movement, which was the first that you remember? And I'll just give you guys a couple seconds to.
Actually, when I try to click that, it says there's no such event active right now.
What?
I don't know if other people are having that same issue.
That is unfortunate. Let's see if I can rectify that. Oh. Okay. Perfect. Okay. Okay, so we've got a vote for Arab Springs. Isn't that interesting? 2 votes for Arab Springs. Okay. The truth is, right, the first activism movement was the California immigration protest. Isn't there like a saying that says like from babes or something like that? Anyways, it was in March 2006. A couple of high school students in the Los Angeles area used text messaging to organize like a classroom walkout because they were opposed to some proposed changes that were coming in the US immigration laws that would affect their fellow students. And then they in turn reached out to some other teens on MySpace in like the wider California Central Valley, and it inspired another 1,000 students in Fresno to join the walkout. So that was the pioneer of the phenomenon that we know as social media activism today. That was the first. But does this even work? Like, I want to talk about some critiques of the social media involvement. So slacktivism is like it's a combination of the term slacker and activism, and it talks about like rudimentary actions on digital platforms that are used to support that issue, but it doesn't really take much effort on the part of the participants. So you probably have seen slacktivism actions like signing online petitions or copying like statuses on your social network uh, status. Um, the mindset of these people are okay, these petitions, yeah, they gather tens of thousands of signatures quickly, but they are unlikely to be more effective at swaying an elected representative's vote than like a crowd of in person, in the fresh constituents presenting their requests and pleas in person. So, in a sense, what slacktivism critics are saying is that social activism is just for like participant gratification, but it lacks like engagement and commitment, and it fails to produce any kind of tangible effect in promoting any kind of cause. And I think there are examples of slacktivism that we can think of, or perceptions of slacktivism. I don't know if you guys remember the Starbucks' Race Together campaign, but that's like the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of it. It's like um, it received so much public backlash and just mockery because people thought it was insincere. And for those of you guys who need a little bit of reminder, I just want to tell you that it was it was in the wake of like the Michael Brown Eric Gardner shooting um by the police, and I think Starbucks baristas were supposed to write hashtag race together on cups and like engage in discussion about race relations with their customers about it. But people were like, how can you have a meaningful conversation about this very heavy subject in a coffee shop, like at a counter while I am getting my, you know, caramel macchiato? Like this don't make no sense. And other people were like, this is an opportunistic marketing ploy on the part of Starbucks. There was so much negative blowback, you guys, that the senior vice president of their global communications had to delete his account. He had to piece off Twitter. So greenwashing, woke washing, and kind of washing does not work. And so I have another question for you guys. I'm wondering, how do you think most people perceive social media activism? Do you think they are on the side of the slacktivism critics, or in the sense that it doesn't make a difference, or do most people think it moves the needle? Okay, so we've got a vote for it moves the needle, which I love to see. I'll give you guys like 5 more seconds to answer this question. Love it. So the general consensus is that it moves the needle, right? But the truth is that there are varying perceptions of hashtag activism. I think like 64% of Americans say that social gives voices to, or a voice to underrepresented groups, and uh, for the majority of consumers, that's really important to them. But 71% of them think that social makes people believe that they're making a difference when they're actually not. And so for popular movements like Black Lives Matter, and where there's a lot of performative allyship, the burden of proof is on these individuals and these companies to really involve themselves in the discussion. But nonprofit organizations can really help when it comes to like issuing clear directives and helping the layperson navigate these situations. by those clear directives, and helping them showcase like authenticity. Some people just don't know where to start. And I'll speak a little bit more about that a little bit later. But let's talk a little bit about the benefits of social media activism, um, and why I think the critiques aren't uh, not valid, but I just think they're short sighted. Um, so the first benefit I wanted to highlight is how social media allows individuals to express their opinions related to collective causes. So obviously it brings eyeballs on issues that maybe would not have had those eyeballs on them, you know, with the user base of these platforms. Some of these eyeballs can belong to like authorities and like ministries or politicians or what have you, people who ordinarily would have been a little bit more difficult to reach. And then we also have the phenomenon known as vigilantism, which is similar to vigilantism, right? It's like where perceived norm transgressions, so like misogyny and that sort of thing, they're exposed and they're publicly sanctioned. So social is a place where you're held accountable, or you can hold people accountable rather. Uh, and people are able to involve like others outside of their online community to like collectively negotiate new shared realities, and this can really empower communities. And we saw this in hashtag free the nipple, when women were posting topless photos and they were trying to like normalize unsexualized representations of the female torso. So feminists have this viewpoint that they're trying to negotiate what is and is not acceptable for the wider public, and they're trying to reclaim the feminine figure. And then another benefit is there are studies that show that small online actions actually ease people into more costly offline actions. So uh, it's like a gateway action. um, Online activism can help you cultivate like psychological preconditions that will help you embolden um, the audience that you're talking to embrace like more burdensome offline protests. So uh, it's a stepping stone. And then the last thing is we have interpersonal mobilization, or what I like to call FOMO. So basically, when other people are speaking on an issue, you want to get involved in the conversation. And so you have more people speaking about said issue. So that's the end goal. Those are the benefits of engaging in hashtag activism, social media activism. But a lot of us are probably at ground zero. So we're gonna shift gears a little bit right now and speak to how you can get your accounts off the ground, um, and what you need to do to grow your followers, what you need to be posting, that sort of thing. Excellent. So let's talk about the differences between platforms. If you're going to be engaging with your audience effectively, then you need to know what sort of party you're going to be throwing, and who is going to be invited to your party. And for me, what you see on your screen right now is a really easy way to visualize what networks are used for what purposes. So, um, LinkedIn is kind of like a trade show. So think professional networking, connection building, thought leadership, and industry trends. Twitter is a cocktail party. So, in the moment content, breaking news, so the live events, timely kind of relevant updates. Um, Facebook is a dinner party. So you want to share like interesting stories, maybe a few anecdotes, or like relevant information in like a casual way. And then Instagram is pretty much the same thing as Facebook. We consider it a digital gallery. So same interesting stories, but it's more curated, it's more visual, and images are the star of the show. So I just wanted to include this, handy little cheat sheet on, differentiators between social networks. So if this is useful to you, please take a screenshot or take your phone and snap a picture. This is just like a table that looks at the ideal length of a post, the ideal number of hashtags, the ideal amount of time that to post per week. But yeah, these are just guidelines if you're looking to get started. Social media is really creative. It's not really black and white. Some of the rules are malleable. Okay, so how often should we be posting? Um, Regular posting is what's going to be driving like audience growth and engagement. And so I want you guys to focus on building a regular cadence. So maybe aim for like 2 posts per week. And this is very, very important because you can actually grow your followers 2 times faster just by posting every single week consistently compared to like those who post like less than once a week. And as you build, capacity, you can start to post more. But the first thing is cadence. And if you don't have time to post every day, that's still okay. uh the most important thing is to focus on just building a consistent cadence. um on your screen right now, I have 2 examples of like content calendars. So the I don't know if this is your right or your left. The green calendar is a company that posted, once every other day consistently for a month. And the other calendar, the red calendar, posted um, very frequently, and then it probably teetered off and then decided to post again. In both of these examples, they posted like 12 times a month, so it technically adds up to 3 times a week. But the green calendar spaced out its posts evenly and consistently, whereas the red calendar, got a little excited, maybe posted every day, ran out of steam, didn't post along again for a long period of time. So uh the green calendar got better engagement. My advice is just to like pace yourself. And yeah, aim for like 2 posts per week and then build up from there. So how can people find you and your cause? How can we get this ball rolling? Well, people generally find or you get new followers from like 3 main places. Either they are prompted through like an email or a website that's aligned to the profile. Maybe they discover your content through hashtags, or your post is shared to them through a friend or influencer or something like that. So the big reason that people want to follow you is for your content, right? So it's important to find a balance in the content mix that would make your audience happy. So most of my clients generally tend to split their content up into these 4 categories. So educate, entertain, inspire, and promote. So educational content is like it sparks curiosity. It adds something to somebody's knowledge bank. And you can think of this as like tips or FAQs, that sort of thing. Did you knows maybe? And then entertaining content. People think entertaining content has to be funny. Not really. It just has to be intriguing. It just needs to keep your audience engaged and interested in what's coming next. Inspirational content is it's positive, it's memorable, it's like a message that's going to stick out in your viewers' mind, and really drive them, to keep going and tackle the problem. Or we usually see people-centric stories when it comes to this particular content category. um, and then promotional content, which is probably the one that you're most familiar with when it comes to brands, is um, just talking about like encouraging your viewers to take the next step. It's like a basic tip that just includes like a call to action, telling people what they should do. So yeah, once you've decided how your content is going to be organized, then we need to then look into identifying some content themes, which is going to help you organize what to post. And then finally, we would need to decipher what vehicle is the best way to deliver this message in. or rather, what platform and post type should we be using? Should we be posting this on Instagram with like a carousel post or multi-image post, as it's also called, or maybe want to look at putting it in our stories? And the aim is just to use different content combinations to tell the best story and the best rhetoric. And the way that a lot of these algorithms work is some of the ranking signals that they use is uh is oh dear, I lost my train of thought. Algorithms, ranking signals, content uh combinations. Nope, it's gone. Moving on. So I just wanted to talk about like or end on like an aspirational note, which is like a lesson from our peers and some 5 best practices from other uh, social justice organizations. Sorry. Um, so let's start with probably the most popular uh, social justice movement that I've seen in my lifetime, or maybe second. It's ALS, right? The aim of the game is just basically everybody needs to be aware of like the terms and conditions for getting involved in something, and so your audience needs to know exactly what they should do, why, for what cause. um, and ALS was an organization that did this masterfully. So they ran this ice bucket challenge in 2014. um, ALS is like Lou Gehrig's disease, if you don't know. And then the ice bucket challenge just involved like dumping a bucket of ice water on somebody's head to promote awareness of uh, and donations to ALS research. And yeah, the challenge went viral on social media. I think it was in part due to their like nomination system. So once somebody had completed the challenge, they would have to nominate another person to complete it as well. And if you didn't do it in 24 hours, then you were supposed to forfeit by way of charitable donation. And the this movement was so successful. I think in part because of like the low barrier to participation, it didn't really take much. I think it was entertaining for people to watch. It was just like a self-made video on your phone that was just under a minute long. And there was a lot of like celebrity participation, as you can see here. Oh gosh, what's this guy's name? Benedict Cumberbatch is one celebrity who took part. And in the end, there was like 2.4 million tagged videos that were circulating Facebook. And I think don't don't get me wrong, but I think it's around $115 million in donations that they had um, gathered at the end of it. And so, of course, that kind of money is very transformative uh, to an association that did not have much to begin with. And so they invested it in research and like assistive technologies to help increase the access to healthcare and services for people who are living with said disease. Um, the second best practice is platforming lived experiences. So, obviously, many social justice causes work to build equity for minorities and underrepresented groups and individuals in society. And the stories and struggles of minorities are not well known or not publicized, but social is can provide a platform to amplify and share them with potentially millions of people around the world. And that kind of exposure can really help share lived experiences about racial violence or sexual harassment or other forms of like oppression directly from the mouths of you know the oppressed or the underrepresented. And the Me Too movement was a great example of this. It was a source of like solidarity for women of all backgrounds who, have, and I'll take that back. It wasn't just women, who people who have experienced sexual harassment, and it focused on the experience of sexual violence survivors and from all like walks of life, and they told their stories. Uh, and they wanted people who engage with the movement to, you know, see how common sexual harassment was. And I think the popularization of the topic really instigated some understanding for sexual assault, and I think it achieved its mandate to really reduce or increase tolerance um, for sexual abuse victims, and I guess reduce tolerance for like abusive behaviors. So best practice number 3 is promote and plan events. So Occupy Wall Street is, a modern example of like a grassroots political movement um, that just like had action from the power of the masses. You know what I mean? The Occupy movement really operated from like a bottom level organization. It didn't have any official leader, but it really had the mindset that all individuals are leaders. And this kind of protest, it spanned like multiple weeks. It had like um, international um, coverage, and people from all over the world were using social media to communicate when these events were going to be held, and document what took place at them. And so each location of like the movement, I guess, would establish its own set of organizational practices, and they use like virtual and concrete spaces, and they um, basically the phenomenon that we know as Occupy Wall Street really relied on social media's ability to foster like unified collective participation. That's what I would say about that. And the fourth practice is signal boosting. Please stick with me. So I think social media provides like the opportunity for the voice of the individual to be amplified in many cases, but I think this voice can also still be lost in the noise of the internet, right? And so I think it takes a community using a shared feature to like gain traction for a post, um, and allowing it to spread to much wider audiences. So this is what we call signal boosting, and it occurs when like fellow social media users share a single message, and when it's done well, signal boosting content can go viral. So I don't know if you guys have seen this post on your social media in the last couple of months, but it was in regards to the Free Palestine movement. Regardless of where your politics lie, I think that there are some lessons to be learned from the Free Palestine movement as it relates to how they've handled social. They have understood the resistance areas of their target audience, the areas that might confuse their audience, and they have addressed it in their messaging. And it was just like an easily digestible medium that people can share and with their followers, and they can understand why this conflict is happening. And it was so effective that the opposing side, so this was from the Free Palestine movement, so the opposing side, the IDF, did a mock-up of the same exact meme. It was that effective. And I don't think people understand how like amazing that meme, I guess, was. um I think we witnessed in real time the shifting of what we call like the Overton window, which is like it's a term that's used to talk about the range of subjects that mainstream media deems like publicly acceptable to discuss and debate. So social media outlets have really empowered people to express themselves and find others that share their views, um, and band together to break into the mainstream. And I think by promoting the spread of unconventional knowledge, i.e. the meme in the previous slide, individuals can feel emboldened to promote unlikely arguments. And the last and final best practice is partnering with brands and influencers. So it's not just individuals that are expected to participate in this discussion about race, but consumers are also expected to, or are they are expecting brands to join the conversation. In fact, around like 70% of consumers say that it is important for brands to take a stand on social issues. And, I think that's quite interesting, especially in the context of BLM, because we saw a couple of brands try to join the conversation and they missed the mark. They were, presumably well meaning, but they came across with this, templated boilerplate that just said, we at brand are committed to fighting injustice by posting images to Twitter that express our commitment to fighting injustice. But I'm not going to tell you how we're going to be doing it. And we do not want to be held accountable. Thank you very much. Goodbye. And Aurora James saw this and she said, I don't like this. She saw this kind of messaging from brands in 2020 and decided to start what was called the 15% Pledge, which is a US based nonprofit organization. She was just watching Black owned businesses literally shut before her eyes in the middle of a pandemic. And all of these major retailers are saying, oh, we stand with you, but in reality, they really didn't. So she said, I'm going to find a way to make companies make a tangible change. And so this 15% pledge was born out of seeing multiple acts of like social injustice and like police brutality in the United States, but also a lack of like corporate accountability for systemic issues at play. So the pledge is essentially calling on major retailers to dedicate like 15% of their inventory space to Black owned businesses, because Black people account for 15% of the population in the United States, but Black owned brands only hold 1% of shelf space. So how they do that, that's not maths. So you have brands like Old Navy, Sephora, Gap, Macy's, West Elm. They are all taking this pledge. And I think at Macy's, because they posted a status update recently, and they said that at Macy's, they were successful in getting over 385 new Black owned brands on shelves. So that just goes to show. So, we have covered a lot today. Um, we talked about that genuine social media activism is supported by concrete actions and donations and measurable commitments to change. We talked about like small online actions moving people into more costly offline actions. And we said that posting consistently is going to be making your content findable, and it's going to be how you grow your followers. And I want to just leave you with this thought. If you guys can answer this question, you're on the right track. What are the reasons that your audience would follow you on Instagram or any other platform? And that is where you when you start to answer that question, I think you are on the right track. So yeah. Are there any questions? Let's look it up.
So Ashley, I've got a couple that have come in. One is from Joseph, says, have you seen any good resources, best practices on social media use for the protests last summer?
Best practices used for protests last summer, other than the ones that I was talking about earlier. Um, mm, I can't think of any on the top of my head. I think just those five that I had mentioned earlier are ones that I would stick to. Mhm.
And there's another one. I think you touched on some of this later after the question came in, but are you seeing more brands actually following through on their promises? Do any brands surprise you in a good way?
Some are, some aren't. You know, so the ones that have taken like pledges, or gosh, there's another one. It's not just the 15% pledge. I think um, there's also one that has to do with um, hiring more Black people. Uh, and then there are smaller, more niche ones that talk about hiring more Black people in tech, and like um, I think some organizations are following through on their promises, and some aren't. Like it's hard to generalize like that, you know. Um, I'm surprised that I'm actually surprised that Macy's went ahead and stocked 385 new Black owned brands on their shelves. I think that's pretty big. Um, but yeah, that's immense progress, I think.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, a lot of it is the conversations have changed since last year, especially online, and what people are discussing have really kind of, the needle has moved on that. So there's a lot of topics that were kind of maybe off limits a year ago, or before a year ago, that are now being openly discussed, which is great.
100%. I feel like we're much more willing to have discussions on certain things, which, you know, before social would have been taboo. Like I don't know if you remember this, but even when I was growing up, I recall like adults used to say, "Oh, we don't talk about who we vote for. It's not polite," you know. And so it's interesting to see how much that needle has moved, and how with social.
Yeah, and sometimes that moves into a terrible direction too on
That,
social media, and gets isolates families. But
true.
one question, I know it came up last time, and I just wanted to ask it again for this audience in New Orleans. We were talking, like, a lot of these groups are kind of smaller organizations that might not have a good foothold in social media. So is it better to work on one platform and do it really well, with a small staff, or kind of branch out, experiment a lot? What would you recommend?
Yeah, I would go for the platform that you think has the audience that you would want to go after. So let's say, for example, you are, I don't know, a social justice organization that works in the legal world. I don't know anything about anything that's not social media, but um, uh, I would, probably focus posting my content on LinkedIn versus like an Instagram or a Facebook. If I was going after um, moms, right? Let's say I am an organization, like an association for a pediatric disease, right? Leukemia or something. Um, Maybe I would want to go to a social network that has a strong, like, mommy blogging community. So Instagram or Facebook, you know? So go where you think your audience is.
That's great. Any other questions for Ashley? All right. right. Well, Ashley, thank you again for your time. And I know this is the third city you joined us for, so really appreciate you coming in and sharing your thoughts. I learn something every time you present, so I appreciate that too.
Thank you.
Any other final thoughts before you close out?
Um, just that, like, I know that sometimes social can be a big scary world because people are like afraid to make a mistake and making your brand look bad, but everybody feels that way. And don't overthink it because the social media has a very short memory. People make mistakes, it's human. And social is all about showing that human side. So jump in.
That's great. All right. Well, thank you, Ashley. Have a great weekend, and thanks again.
Thank you. See you guys on the internet somewhere.
All right. Next up, we have Brian Fairbanks from Converse Digital here in New Orleans. His profile on LinkedIn reads journalist, copywriter, and social media expert with more than 13 years in digital marketing trenches, having launched and managed brand accounts on Facebook, Instagram, MySpace, and Friendster. I can assure you that Brian is not here to talk about MySpace and Friendster. Rather, he's here to discuss fostering a sense of community through social media platforms. Something I can assure you that all is very important to all of us here. So Brian is, like as I mentioned, Converse Digital here in New Orleans. He's also worked with high-profile companies in the past. I think it was NBC Universal and Turner Broadcasting are just a couple. So with that, Brian, take it away.
I'm going to talk about nothing but MySpace.
Yes, Friendster, I want it.
Yes. Yeah, I actually got my start on MySpace. I was going to talk a little bit about that because, as you mentioned, I have a background in journalism and I have a background working, in these early social media platforms. And I also have a background in politics. I think it's partly because they were all considered not real careers at the time that I started each of them, that I ended up doing all three of them as a career. And now I've combined all three into, one career, not just three part-time careers. And I did that mainly because, well, I was going to say that I started out actually in New Orleans. I got hired by two of my professors at the University of New Orleans, Stephen Ambrose, who wrote Band of Brothers, and Douglas Brinkley, who is the editor for Hunter S. Thompson's books and had Jack Kerouac's diaries in his safe. So working for them, I basically learned how to be a personal assistant and, did all their typing. But mainly what I did was I broke down these longer pieces for them. They had a lot of, Jack Kerouac's diaries were thousands of pages in various notebooks, and what was in them? What did he use from them to write his novels? So, I was 18 or 19 and I started doing social media copy without it going out on the internet, breaking things down into bite-sized characters. And after I worked for them, I got into politics. I worked on a congressional campaign and a Senate campaign, and both were losers. They were great people, but they lost. They were not, losers. But they were both anti-war candidates, and I got involved in grassroots politics through them. I was in charge of communications and strategy, and again, parsing big ideas into small packages to go out of pamphlets, emails. Social media wasn't really a thing, but Facebook did exist at the time. So we had, people in college posting stuff for the campaign. And then from there, I ended up working for Billionaires for Bush, and that's where we get into what I'm doing today, really. Billionaires for Bush, before you log out of here and recoil from me, was a satirical grassroots political campaign that sprung up in 2000 and then became a really much bigger thing in 2004. And yeah, basically we went around the country dressed as, obnoxiously rich Republicans, and got into events with Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld. And our most famous stunt, we got on the front page of the New York Times because we sent Karl Rove to a Karl Rove fundraiser, and he gave a big speech announcing Bush's 2004 campaign platform, which was going to be anti-war, much more equitable tax plan, not going after Social Security, things like that. And the press ran with it. And then he went into the event and he was arrested because he was not actually Karl Rove. But people didn't realize that at the time. They didn't know what Karl Rove looked like. So we did a lot of stunts like that. And man, it would have been so good if even Twitter existed back then. Did not, unfortunately, of course. So all these experiences, the journalism, politics, doing strategy and communications for politicians, and grassroots campaigning, all of this kind of, and personal assistant work kind of combined into getting my first gig, which was on MySpace in 2007. It was working for a Grammy-nominated R&B singer who I won't name, who was a great person and was just super overwhelmed by all these messages coming in on MySpace. So I was her. I became this woman we have nothing in common whatsoever. Except, she was just great to work for and really cared about her fans. And so I think everything I learned on MySpace. Just to kind of bring it back to what Tim was saying. So everything I'm going to tell you today or talk about today kind of comes from that same, 14 years ago experience where I had no idea what I was doing. Nobody knew what they were doing. And I just learned, trial and error through that. So, I think the main things that we learned were applicable to everybody. But my boss sent me an email this morning and he said, there's this big 5, which he always thinks about. And the big 5 is you make them laugh, you make them cry, you make them angry, you inspire them, which tends to be quotes, memes, inspirational quotes, and you make them say, this is a very social media 101 mentality. But once you learn it, it just sits in the back of your mind, and everything else is just a, easy to remember. You're doing it all by instinct mentality. But so what I'm going to talk to you about is taking those ideas, trying to make them laugh, trying to make them think, inform them, and applying them to creating a sense of community on your social media pages. One of the first things I did when I got to Turner Broadcasting was I looked at these TV shows. One of them was about politics, and this political show had been on for 2 years. I think 3 million people watched it every night, which is okay. And they didn't have a social media following. They had, I think, 20,000, which, for a lot of organizations, 20,000 is a great number. When you have 3 million fans, it's not good. So we did a couple of things. The main thing that we did to build it up, and it eventually got to over 1 million Facebook followers from 20,000, and none of that was through ads, and none of that was through going on air and saying, please follow us on Facebook, because no one cares about that. It's just all considered marketing, and people turn it out as soon as they see anything that sounds like or looks like marketing. So what we instead did was we became a source of news for that community. And at the same time, the Other 98 was starting. I don't know if people know what that is. It's a controversial Facebook page. It was born out of Occupy Wall Street, and my friends and I coming up with this idea that was the other 99%, the other 98 was what it eventually became when we lost control of the page to somebody else. But the other 98 became just a platform for sharing news and fostering outrage, I hate to say. And that's probably why they have gotten such a bad rep for fake news, is because they've done actually too good of a job in stirring people up on the left. But they built up a huge following. And the way that they did it, the way that we did it at Turner, were exactly the same thing. Just concentrating on growing the community organically, responding in the comments, being really engaged and communicating with people who are already fans. And now, especially on Facebook, you know who your top fans are because it literally says top fans with the little diamond next to it. So you can focus a lot more on those people, responding to them, messaging them like personally, saying, hey, you know, I'm in charge of this organization. Really thank you for all your contributions. You're retweeting us, whatever it is. And we want to give you something. We want to bring you closer, basically. We want to reward you. And you don't have to use any of those terms, but fostering the community is what it's all about on social media. It's not about going viral. You'll get, you know, thousands of likes or whatever, but you won't build your community. What you really need to do is build slowly, methodically, and organically. And anything else you do could get your numbers up. It could get you a lot of new followers. But what you really need to be concentrating on is the long game. So let's talk about that. So I'm gonna figure out how to share my screen. There we go. Desktop. And then I want Keynote, I think. Oh my God, it's not gonna let me, is it? Well, I can just tell you what it says. So basically, fostering a sense of community is, if it's the goal, that's actually not, you know, the beginning of your social media strategy. That's obviously the end game, or it's sort of the middle of your strategy. The beginning of your strategy is to figure out what social media is in terms of your organization and how you can slowly build up at least a small following at first, and then piggyback off of that to build community and to eventually be able to drive conversation in social justice and in any other political field by basically just posting, as Ashley was talking about, you know, twice a week, maybe a little bit more depending on how big your community gets, and how, sorry, I'm just going to change my sharing settings here. I don't know why this is such a big issue for this computer, but it is apparently right now. Well, it will literally not let me even type in my password for some reason. Well, that's fun. All that work on these amazing, beautiful slides that you'll never be able to see because of some weird thing that's happening there. Okay, well, so social media is, as far as activists are concerned, a free platform to get messaging out to potential recruits for a cause. And despite strict and unforgiving algorithms that bury organizational posts, looking at you, Facebook, and punishing marketing language or events, there are ways to have an impact and to measure that impact. Social media is not a joke. It's not serious either. Taking yourself too seriously on social media will turn people off. Even the most diehard activists need comic relief. And as any of you know, if you've spent any time on social media, and I'm sure most of you have spent lots of time if you're sitting through this discussion, is that social media is seems to center around comedy. The slide that I'm using right here is actually from the parliamentary debate in the UK before Brexit, and it's Nigel Farage, shouting into a microphone, and there's a PM sitting behind him with a sign that says "He's lying to you," pointed at him, and the tweet says, "Not all heroes wear capes." So I think this, to me, is like the perfect balance. It's funny, you're not laughing and then kind of moving on. You're kind of smirking maybe and appreciating the humorous bent of it, while also appreciating the brilliance of this sort of collective tweet. Not just the quick, reference, "Not all heroes wear capes," but also the amazing image of someone saying "He's lying to you" right behind Nigel Farage. So that is sort of, to me, what encapsulates a perfect piece of social media. It's short as well. Political social media, I should say. So yeah, we'll hear about some more of those. I guess you won't see a lot of them, but so obviously, if you're going to try to build community through your social media, you want to think always of the community. It's all well and dandy to have a social post go viral or get 1 million likes, but did it get you any new fans? Did your current followers comment on it and talk about how great it was? If not, they may have been put off. Hey, bandwagon jumpers, I've known about this group for years. My voice is more important. You see a lot of that in social media, not in those exact words, but in people infighting in comments because they are, feeling territorial. They're feeling like, oh, these people aren't real activists. These people don't even really know what this page is for, what the cause is, because they're jumping on the bandwagon from this viral tweet. And so what you really want to do is not worry so much about going viral, but about playing the long game. A social media community is basically 3 things. Once you've gotten to that, you can check these 3 things off your list, you're home free. It relies on super fans. It's not easy to measure a social community on metrics alone. Do you have a community that's big enough on Facebook that you see several top fans and don't recognize them from previous comments? Well, that's a sure sign you've built a community that's too big for you to even keep track of. So the second thing is organic posts do well. If in the beginning you're building fans and followers one of 2 ways, slowly and mostly through paid ads, or by cannibalizing a rival or defunct account built up by another person or organization, which I have actually done, and it does have a lot of success. We could talk about that later if people are interested in, taking over the numbers from a defunct fans page. So if those 2 things are not building your community right away, you just probably need to post more. Sorry, Ashley. Share outside news. Outside news is a term that I just made up for this presentation, but it's something I've been doing for years instinctively, which is research breaking news in social justice or elected politics, specifically related to your area of focus. Not news about your organization, not, here's what this chapter of this group did this week. Here's our amazing press release. You can certainly post, photos from a groundbreaking, from a day of door knocking, volunteer work, anything. But that's probably not going to bring new people in. It's going to reward the community that is already there, which is fine. But for the purposes of this, we're talking about building a community that brings in outside people, that people are seeing their friends share stuff on social media and then saying, oh, yeah, what's going on over at this page? I want to check them out. And then going there and following. That's it. That's all we really need. Because that is telling me that your account is doing something helpful and fostering that community. So outside news is therefore, not news about your organization, but reported news by other sources. The Intercept, BBC, a local newspaper not owned by Sinclair or Tribune Media, something that is pretty ironclad, don't share from the other 98. So there's 3 ways to do build a sense of community without cannibalizing, basically. You rely on your super fans, you cultivate them. Your organic posts do well, and if they don't, you need maybe more of them, and you need to be responding to people more in the comments. And you're sharing outside news. You want people to start following and coming to your page and ignoring algorithms that make them forget all about it. You want them to coming directly to your social media account. Because if they do, they're beating the algorithm. And when they see that you're posting, breaking news, something really relevant, they will share from your account, and they will start doing that for everything. And I see a lot of the most successful social media accounts in politics, in social justice, or anything related to this are doing that. They are the people who, if you go to Instagram and you're looking at the bottom right-hand corner or bottom left to see where this post came from that's on Instagram stories, I'm seeing more and more that they're coming directly from social justice organizations, and the same ones repeatedly, not just, oh, I've never heard of these people. No, she posted from them yesterday. That's happened to me twice today, actually. So community is about inspiring others, not just sharing your own success. A lot of failed social media accounts focused on their own internal successes and less so about encouraging action. Black Lives Matter, Occupy, and Stop Funding Hate, among other groups and movements, are once just a social media campaign with no central organization, and some still are today. Orgs inspired these movements by promoting them with no marketing connection of their own. Use hashtag blank to enter to win, or in honor of our 10th anniversary, tell we're giving away this. No marketing speak at all. And two of these groups actually that are really doing well right now, I think this space is Stop Funding Hate and Black Lives Matter. Stop Funding Hate is a British grassroots campaign. You probably remember them. They basically went after the British tabloids, and all British newspapers are tabloids basically right now, except the Guardian maybe, for xenophobic reporting on immigration. And they basically, kept their campaigns very simple. They posted, hey, Lego, I see you're promoting a giveaway with the Daily Mail. Here's why, and here's an article explains why you should boycott the Daily Mail. And a lot of people jumped on these because they were very concise, obviously on Twitter, but you get everything from that. I should mention that the Lego tweet also said, because they're bigoted on immigration, something like that. And it's very easy to just hit retweet on that. You're a fan of Lego, you hate, xenophobic, anti-immigration stances, or you hate the Daily Mail. I mean, a lot of people hate the Daily Mail. So I think it's kind of perfect tweet for this purpose because, first of all, it worked. A lot of people signed the petition. A lot of people retweeted it. A lot of people replied tagging Lego and putting more pressure on them. And of course, other people wrote letters to the editor of the Daily Mail complaining about this. And they won. Lego pulled its giveaways. At the same time, the Body Shop, I don't know whether Stop Funding Hate went after them or not, but they pulled their advertising. I guess they had a lot of advertising or whatever, but don't get me wrong, I don't really believe a lot of these corporations are so great, and that they're, even when they say things like, oh, I'm cutting ties, I didn't know, that if they're really cutting ties, or maybe they bought like one ad, $500 or something. So yeah, so there's a lot that can be taken from that, just that post, because the Lego tweet itself is not fostering community necessarily as its goal, but it does, because a lot of people joined Stop Funding Hate, especially when they kept seeing stories about it in the media. Lego pulled their promotion. Oh, Stop Funding Hate, they're really doing this great work. And then they came and followed. But also, after, like I said, after the tweet itself, people were replying to the tweet, tagging Lego, making sure to include the @ and replying with their own views on it. And Stop Funding Hate kept that going by liking, retweeting, responding, and keeping the conversation flowing. Building a community within that one tweet, which was directed at a faceless company. So, all right, so let's move on. Let's talk about some of the ways that you can specifically improve your social media to bring in that community before you foster it itself. Slideshows on Instagram are, for social justice movements, a lifeline. In 2020, Black Lives Matter and other anti-racist group slideshows were among the most viewed and most shared content on Instagram. But there's a way that you can take that experience this year and beyond and boost your engagement rates and your views. Now, here's a scary number. A good percentage engagement rate on Instagram is 1.3. That sounds really low, because obviously it's just barely 1 out of every 100 people that follow you are going to respond to your content. So, if you have 200 people and you're getting 2 likes on something, that is pretty much par for the course these days. I think a lot of that number is dragged down by companies that are just posting garbage, and they're not getting any traction. A plumbing company posting, hey, we got new hours, it's not gonna get any likes. So, and that's, I'd say, what 90% of what we're not seeing on social media is brands and fan pages posting content that is just getting buried in the algorithm. So anyway, it's 1.3%, terrible number. But that number is what the search engine journal found is the average if you're doing a slideshow and you're not telling people to swipe. While most get that 1.3%, which is still high for Instagram, because most people are either a huge brand that's getting tons of attention, or they're getting zero attention because the algorithm's burying them, or it's just not an organization that's or a company that's posting something that people can react to. So putting the swipe left message in gets you to 2%. And that's still sounds really low, but of course it's almost double what the average is. So I would say encouraging people to interact with your content is the best way to get people to interact with your content. It can be a little bit embarrassing and push the envelope on that sort of marketing-y thing, which you want to avoid, of course. But if you can get to 2% engagement rates, you've statistically doubled, which could be great, especially if you have thousands of followers already. So that is one way. Slideshows encourage people to swipe. Another thing is the average video post on Instagram gets about 1.4, 1.45 views or engagement rate. Whereas an image post on Instagram specifically as a regular post, not a story, gets 1.74% engagement rate. So that's a 3% increase. I'm sorry, 0.3% increase. Very small, and you may want to stick to doing video if you're doing a lot of video. But if you're trying to build a sense of community, you're trying to build up your followers so you can build the community off of them, you might want to concentrate on images. Just people tend to see that a video is starting to play and they just skip it. Now, this is different from Twitter. Twitter, doesn't autoplay, at least it's not supposed to. And you will probably have a better chance of getting people to play it. I don't know if you'll get people to react to it as well. But if you really, really, really want them to see a video, it's Twitter. And if you lose nothing by posting it as a story on Instagram and driving people to your Twitter and trying to get them to follow you in both places. All right, anyway, let's move on. So fostering a sense of community. I think one of the biggest pages that does it right is Humans of New York. They are not political, of course. They are very political, just in a subtle way, especially in the comments, especially in the policing of the community, which you are not seeing. But I see it because I'm usually on the post pretty early, and I watch the comments come in, and I watch comments get attacked, and then those comments all disappear. But let's talk about why Humans of New York became such a big Facebook page. It's not the viral posts. Every post of theirs goes viral. They don't have 10 bajillion followers because of one viral post, or even several. It's because they're devoted. They have a devoted fan base. Let's be clear about this. It's not just a huge fan base. It's very high engagement, and that's because they have a steady stream of high quality, emotionally affecting content, organically posted over a period of years. It has its own nickname because Honey, or HONY, users feel that they are a community already, just by being fans of this page. So Brandon, who runs it, doesn't have to do anything. He only has to post quotes. And these quotes are not incendiary. They are not loaded. They're not political. But they're all political. They're all about people struggling. They're all about people having trouble connecting, having trouble running their businesses, trouble with immigration, the breakup of families. There's so much there to take away if you look closely at how they do it. And he's interviewing these people over hours and parsing this stuff down into 1 to 2 line pieces of content, which is just amazing to me. So yeah, I would say that one of the biggest things you can do is to take away from this is to ultimately look through what he's doing. It's really just him and his presumed staff, potentially, is that he didn't have one big post in the beginning that hit and brought people in. He built this up over the years by just methodically posting stripped down, raw, but not too intense content, telling stories. That's another great way to foster a community, is to spread a story out over several posts. Maybe interview somebody that your organization has helped, and react to the comments. Make sure the person you interview is involved in the comments as well. Get people hooked on one piece of content and keep them coming back for the next. Here's one that's going to be a little tough for me to explain without the photo. Well, so I went through Now This Politics, their feed, because I wanted to talk about this outside news thing that I was talking about. This is cheating a little bit because Now This is itself a news outlet, but just pretend. It has everything you could want, okay? So it has a non-editorialized piece of writing that explains everything in a short summary above the fold. It starts out, a federal judge has ruled that Jacob Chansley, AKA the Q shaman, ... Okay, I won't read you the whole thing. So short summary, not editorializing at all. It's just pure snappy writing up top, and not getting into any rant, any personal feelings about it. The headline, which is Q Shaman denied release ahead of Capitol riot trial. It's a little long. It's a mouthful, but it's easy on the eyes. It's just a picture of the Q Shaman guy, but he's not wearing his ridiculous makeup or his Viking outfit or whatever the hell it was. He's just a bald guy with a beard who's glaring into the camera, and he looks really surprised to be in custody. Well, this had 58,779 views yesterday alone. That is like 10 times more than their other posts got yesterday. Why would that do so well? Well, two reasons, besides the ones that I just mentioned, which are, short, snappy headline and copy that explains everything very quickly. It's an arresting image altogether. Quick copy that I can scan, headline very clear, and an image that tells me all I need to know. It's a mugshot, okay? But also they're engaged in the comments. There are people commenting, and first of all, Now This Politics is commenting, and then their super fans are commenting as well. Everyone is basically saying the same thing, which is, I hate Q, or Q is fake, or these people are idiots, and charge them with treason, stuff like that. So everyone is participating. Now, that may not be what your organization wants. You may not want everyone to participate, which is fine. Or you may not want everyone to trash someone who's been arrested. Anti-police, that is completely understandable. I think what I want you to take away isn't so much the content here, but just the way that it was presented. And I will try to find this post and send it to you guys in the chat so you can look through. But yeah, Q Shaman denied release ahead of Capitol riot trial. Now, why would that do so well as a headline itself? Why do I love this headline? The main reason is because it captures exactly how you want to write a headline to get a like. Okay, Q Shaman. It's kind of mockery, but it's in quotes, so no one is, editorializing necessarily. Denied. So, if it had said Q Shaman denies everything, that's not going to get as many likes from a progressive social justice audience. What people want to like is either positive news that affirms their own views or negative news that, I wouldn't say attacks, but, puts down in some way the opposing viewpoint. So yeah, denied release ahead of Capitol riot trial. I mean, Capitol riot is great because we all know what that is. But, you're not going to like this post because it says Capitol riot. People don't like that. They recoil from it, left and right. But denied release, if you have a left-wing audience, that's great. So one thing I'm going to talk about in a minute is about how negative messaging is key to that sense of building a community is actually negative content. So negative sentiment is what The Guardian calls it. When it comes to the subject of politics, negative sentiment increases your chances of retweets, but other features, did play a role in this. So I'm not saying like this is it, like go negative and everything. So to foster community spirit, keep the headlines negative and the comments or replies positive to encourage further commenting and build a space where your supporters will come to vent, receive encouragement in return, and perhaps even share information you can use for new posts. So yeah, and not everything has to be negative in your headlines either, and not every headline has to be negative. But if you're really trying to build up, you should be thinking about how to frame your social media copy to be phrased in such a way that your audience or the audience you want is going to be able to hit like and be like, yes, thank you. Because again, if this politics article had been, Q shaman denies, well, yeah, it's not negative in the same sense because I'm not going to like that negative messaging. So anyway, we can talk about that more in a minute. One sort of like motto that I keep in mind about this, especially when doing outside news content, is you want to inform about the past to wisen people up about the future. The Conversation recommends creating content that explains how we got into a predicament, leading to the development of people who are capable of wisdom. It's like a lot of mumbo jumbo kind of, but it just means, if you're writing about, the rise in videos of police shootings, everyone has an opinion on this. Everyone thinks, the internet, social media, cameras have made this more. It was always the same amount of shootings. We just didn't see this stuff before technology caught up. Well, that may not be true. You could find out that police have gotten more brazen after acquittals and so forth before the George Floyd shooting. They could, you could find, your data could disprove this. And then you could phrase your copy as something like, for years, the internet has believed that there were just as many police shootings before, or there were even more police shootings before social media. Well, we crunched the numbers and here's what we found. So you don't give them the answer, but you indicate that there will be an answer shortly if they click on this content, go to your website. And then hopefully people will read the article and come back with the newfound wisdom to talk about how we got into the predicament, how we can get out of it. So sort of in summary, to create impactful social media content and foster a sense of community, I'm going to think about 4 things, 4 sort of key words. Or you want to keep it organic, light, angry, and informative. And how you do all that, organic, light, angry, inform, is you do 4 things. You create community-driven content with a balanced tone that inspires engagement and is informative. So community-driven is, avoiding trying to go viral or sounding like a campaign. You want to keep your fans close. We're all going to use this hashtag today, right? Okay. Avoid marketing speak, join our mailing list, and engage with commenters organically. John, thanks for these tips. Do you think we should blank? Or what did you think about what so-and-so said yesterday? But you also don't want to get too serious, and you don't want to get too silly. Light tone is what you want to go for. Even if it's something that is just absolutely outrageous, so-and-so was acquitted. There is no justice in this country. You don't want to be very explicit about it. Let your fans be explicit. Let your fans take what you're offering and go to that natural place. Don't just post funny things, snarky material, because yeah, you'll get some retweets, whatever, but people aren't going to follow you just because of that. They, from organizations like yours, they're going to want content. They're going to want, real information and news. So to do that, you want to inspire engagement, not just cheap engagement that is, not following. No one follows you, but your tweets do really, really well. No, that's not going to do anything for your organization. What you want is them to follow you and then to remain engaged with you in comments and sharing your content to friends and saying like, this is really amazing or terrifying or something. And my boss at Converse Digital is always talking about making them angry when copy seems limp. It's tricky though, because if, say, now this headlined story, QAnon nut released without charge, you get lots of angry comments, but you'd also lose those likes that they got on their other story. Find content that doesn't anger them by itself, but taps into their anger. QAnon needs to be exposed, says Watchdog Group. And we can talk a little bit about this more. I bet this is probably really confusing for some of you. It's a real fine line between being angry and inspiring anger, tapping into the anger. But yeah, I can go over that a little bit more, is that, if you saw this piece of content, would you be able to click like on it if you didn't know who this organization was? Or would you say, yeah, that's typical QAnon nut released without charge? It just doesn't have the same connection to the audience, the left audience. And then the last thing is be informative, of course. So if you simply regurgitate what everyone else is talking about, Trump said another dumb thing today, and you're not the first account to post it, you're just going to be one of thousands trying to go viral for the same information. Try to go through Google News with your relevant search terms, housing and the name of your city or something like that, and just seeing what you can pull up each morning, probably before you do anything else, because then you'll be more likely to beat all the 9-to-5ers to posting it. And then, if someone follows both of you and they see theirs first, they're not going to share yours. Obviously, they've already shared it from the other account. So look for fresh, beat them to the punch content. Yeah, and then once you do, foster discussion in your comment sections by asking questions of those who react or those who are top fans, and you know their names, you know their usernames. You can just tag them. So yeah, community driven with a balanced tone, inspires engagement and is informative. But we can talk a little bit about that if there are any questions. I hope that you guys have been able to hear me because, oh yay, 4 questions. Okay. What are the biggest lessons learned from corporations that can be applied to social justice organizations? Great question. One of the big lessons was to leverage talent. That's what they call famous people in corporate speak. If you don't know any celebrity backers, that is totally fine. Most people do not. What I would say to take away, to sort of adapt that corporate, let's leverage this, have these people be the voice of the Facebook page which is what we did. And I had taken that from MySpace as well, was that if people think they're talking to the owner, the celebrity, then they're much more likely to engage with you. And you can just be you. I was the celebrity. I was Shaq. I was Jesse Ventura. I was Schwarzenegger. I've done all these people that, a lot of their views I don't agree with, but they were easy to adapt my voice to them and vice versa, for the comments, and just keep people engaged. Just you can be humorous in the comments as well, crack wise, things like that. But yeah, to apply it to social justice specifically, it's a lot of that. What I was talking about with the Humans of New York is applicable by talking to people that support your organization, break down an interview into stories, and just keep people like riveted. Basically, here's this person, we've been helping them for the last year, and here's where they were a year ago, and here's where they are today. Of course, you're going to need permission for all this stuff. How do you deal with agitators and trolls on our social media? Any best practices you can recommend? Yes, great question. I actually do most of my work right now for Fireball. Sazerac owns Fireball, and Sazerac is a New Orleans liquor company. They also own Buffalo Trace and Southern Comfort and a million other brands. For some reason, they decided I was a Fireball guy. I'm not a Fireball guy. Probably more of a Trump guy than a Fireball guy, and that's how not a Fireball guy I am. So I took the job because it's playing a character. And when you are dealing with trolls, I think of a lot of what AOC does in her response to trolls, which is to not get into debates with them, not really directly respond, but to take their usually inaccurate, often idiotic response to her post or something she said and reshare it, but with the takedown, because your followers are going to love to see you get into it with people and own them, quote unquote, own them. But if you get into just back and forth in the comments, it's really just going to be them that you're going to see, and you're going to waste time. I mean, one of the things in Billionaires for Bush is that people would come up to us and yell and scream in our faces all the time. And Bush is a great man, we're going to win in Iraq. And what are you going to say to these people? You just getting it. And it's like, well, actually the numbers tell you that, da, da, da. And I did that once. And a friend of mine turned to me and he said, you're not going to convince this person. This person doesn't care about facts. data, information. They just want you to waste your fucking time arguing with them. So if you really want to respond to them, maybe there's a lot of kind of similar sentiment in the comment section, negative sentiment that is like, you know, you guys really screwed this up, blah, 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 blah. That's when you do the AOC mentality of resharing it as its own tweet with your response, or Instagram story, or just create a meme with that original, you know, hate mail message. That's what we would do. And that's what I do at Fireball every day, is when someone's like, oh, Fireball is so gross. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, Fireball is really bad. Like, oh, you're gonna miss out on the party tonight, man. And look at all these people that are here, and posting a picture of like a hilariously sad bar, you know, where there's like a Fireball, a bottle sitting there, and there's no one in the bar. And I mean, that doesn't work for everybody, but the self-deprecating thing really works for Fireball, and people love that stuff. They love it when we're making fun of ourselves, when we're not taking ourselves too seriously, and when we're not getting into fights with idiots. So yeah. The big five, yes. Can I reiterate them again? Is there something to read more about each approach? No, because my boss made it up and sent it to me this morning as a like, hey, you have to do this presentation. You've never done a presentation on social media and you've been doing it for 14 years. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. Here's what you should say. Make them laugh, make them cry. And by the way, these are not all at the same time. You can do them a combination, 2 or 3, one of them, none of them really. But generally, if you're going to get engagement and build community, you need to do one of these each time. Go for the laugh, make them cry, piss them off, inspire them, which tends to be quotes, you know, memes and motivational excerpts from something, interview a famous philosopher, and make them say, So very like super basic, also, but he's very basic. He's, you know, very like, he's the guy who comes up with this stuff. And I operate purely on instinct at this point. But he's absolutely right that these are the keys: laugh, cry, enrage, inspire, think, or, you know, make them think, make them consider it for a while. Because especially this last one makes people share, reshare, repost. So, and he says, rinse and repeat. So 5 things, rinse and repeat. But really, I think what it is also trial and error, you know. Have you done memes? Have you done video? Have you gone back and forth in the comments? Have you asked people to answer a question? What are, you know, it's whatever, pretend it's the first day of 2022. What should this movement, not this organization, what should this movement focus on in 2022? And ask people, and then respond to all the comments, unless you get 1,000. We try to respond to everything on Fireball, which is impossible on a Friday night when there's literally like 10,000 or 50,000 comments sometimes. But we try. We really like try to read every comment and then respond to anything that isn't just a repeat of a joke that someone said 15 comments earlier that they just haven't seen. Love hearing about your experience and knowledge. What are some of your tips for encouraging audience participation? Comments, quote, tweets, replies, etc. I've built a reliable audience, but kind of quiet one. Yeah, see, that's where, you know, a lot of people are. They've got lots of followers, or like a good number. All their friends are following. Everybody that they meet follows them, but they don't. But people aren't really that engaged in social media, and the algorithm's burying you. They're burying everybody that is an organization, a company, a fan page, because you're not running paid media on these platforms. But you know what? I've run paid media on all of them a billion times, and it doesn't change anything. It just builds more of that audience that's not engaged with you. They come in, they follow, they retweet that first thing they saw that you boosted, and you still don't hear from them the next time you post organically. So yeah, so this is the big thing that we're talking about, is how do you build a reliable audience, which is what a community is. And I think what it really comes down to is you engaging with those people, you engaging directly, either in messages, in the comments, liking their own stuff, tagging them sometimes, and just getting them to realize that you're like thinking about them. And that sounds like really like twee or something, but if you're getting people to think about you, that is all that really matters, however you do that. Obviously you don't want to be sending like DMs to like 50 people a day, because then it means that they're still not commenting, they're still not quoting your tweets. And yeah, specifically about quoting tweets, by the way, if you're trying to get people to do that, I think one of those big, stepping stones to getting that is really short one-liners and more humorous than maybe you're doing. I'm not saying yours isn't humorous, it might be. But if you're going back to what I was saying about finding that balance, the tonal balance, you're going to want something that is a little sillier, a little lighter than what normally does well to build community. And if you can find that, the Nigel Farage thing is a perfect example, just saying not all heroes wear capes, and there's a guy the guy's doing this with a little sign behind him says he's lying to you. Boom. And if it's relevant to you, if it's an immigration thing or whatever, and someone stands up at the State of the Union and he's lying to you, Biden, and he's talking about your cause, and not that the Democrats are going to do that, but just pretend that this is that world that we're living in. Then that, I feel like that gets you specifically retweets, is like very simple, and it's your idea. There's going to be a lot of people that are like capitalizing on trending topics out there, especially politically, and they're all going to be saying the same joke. It's always the same joke, right? It's like 10 different phrasings of it, and all 10 of those go viral, and then everyone else just literally plagiarizes the rest. So yeah, you don't want to do that. You want to have your original, keep your voice, but have an original take on it. I don't know how you find that balance. I only go viral once in a while. I joined TikTok, and my second video has 5 million views. My third video has 500 views. And there's absolutely no difference between them. Just one took off because it had a great punchline in it. It was just short and sweet. I said one thing in it, and then that's it. It's over. And everyone has posted it for some reason, or told all their friends about it. And so it has, 5 million views, and I have 2,000 followers. It's not like all my friends watched it or something. So long-winded answer to all of these. But what last thing would be to, if you're thinking about trying to build your community, go deep in the comments, go directly to the source and talk to people. Focusing less on trying to make each post go viral or get shared, retweeted, whatever, and stick with building up your community and getting them to do the work for you, getting them to share, getting them to bring in new people. There you go. Is there anything else? I see there's 3 chat messages.
No, I think that's all anybody else have any questions for Brian? Last call.
So they're all so confused.
No, I think that was great, Brian. It was really great. Really appreciate you sharing your wealth of experience on social media. I think you gave a ton of concise examples of what works and why. And my only thing is I apologize to everybody. I misled them about you not talking about MySpace, but I thought it was a great tie-in.
I could talk about MySpace all day. It's the foundation of the world that we live in today.
All right. Well, any final thoughts, Brian, before we close it out?
No, but if anybody wants to clarify any of this mess or see the presentation that I spent days on that you didn't actually get to see, Twitter, I feel like Facebook doesn't tell you when you have messages from people you don't know. Instagram, it's hard to chat. Find me on Twitter. Brian Fair is my account. I'll send you stuff.
Okay. Well, thanks, Brian. Have a great weekend. And thanks again for joining us, especially on short notice.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for all these local organizations. I didn't even say anything about local organizations. They're all in the presentation. You can see your pictures I took of you guys. But whatever. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Take care, Brian. Thanks. And thanks for everybody for joining us today. I know most of you are working on social media in one way or another, and I hope you really found value in the presentations that you saw today. Thanks to Brian, obviously. Thanks to Will and Ashley for taking time out of their busy day to join us. And we'll be putting the videos online, and we'll be sharing those next week with everybody. And I forgot to say it earlier in the presentation, but congratulations to the Zayla Avant-Garde, the first African-American champion of the Scripps National Spelling Bee from New Orleans. She holds 3 Guinness records for her ability to dribble multiple basketballs at the same time. She's 14. She wants to play in the WNBA and work for NASA someday. So really inspiring young woman. Finally, next Friday, we're going to have a small group training with Salesforce on building data dashboards for social justice organizations. I've sent this message to most of you, but you all have my email address. So if you'd like to join that, it's going to be about 12:30 Central Time. Message me about that and we'll get you into the training. And thanks to everybody for joining this, and have a great weekend. Take care.